What we're working on today is the head or the cranial. A lot of people ask me specific questions. Do I do trigger points? No. Matter of fact, I tried to watch a video the other day on trigger points to understand it better, and I was like, oh my gosh, what a crock of. So totally, again, maybe I should learn it more before I make those kind of statements, but I do not believe insert finger here and just that touch there is going to facilitate changes. Again, these are my beliefs. This is the way I work. I go for efficiency of movement. So even with something like this, like, and really our efforts today are going to be the temporal bone, which is actually this section down here, because it was suggested to one of my clients that theirs was out of alignment. So I go for efficiency of movement, and that's what the lesson is going to be on today. I don't go on that my fingers are specifically on the sutures, that I am facilitating. I mean, you will never see me say, put your thumb, let's say 3 millimeters in off the mandible bone. It's just, it is what it is. I mean, I know I'm touching the jawbone, but I'm not in a specific place for the structure of the bones to facilitate what I need to do. I'm going for efficiency of movement in the system. The system means the entire body, not pieces and parts. Even though I might only be working on, let's say, this section of the head, I'm still consciously working on the feet, your butt, your everything, because we are a system. So I'm going to pass this around so you can see it while I continue to talk. The situation we were just talking about where it was suggested maybe by someone else that the temporal bone was out of alignment. So, and that's where I got the idea to do this lesson. For the most part, when I work on the head though, it's when someone's flat in their back. So I either approach the face from the above or I go through from behind. I do work quite a bit with the head on its side, but only through the back. So I'm looking to see how the neck and the tonus relates. So I might go behind the mastoid processes to quote work on how the neck or the skull is organized, but through from behind. In this case, and that's what I'm teaching today, is I actually worked on the side, the relationship with the nasal cavity to the jaw, and then you started to seeing how the skull changed its relationship to the neck, the top. And then also, I always go back to the torque or the twist. The head is quite interesting because, even you can just see it right here. As I'm taking the top off of a mayonnaise jar. Even as I do this, I immediately elongate. So if I wanted to go look at that picture, you'll see where people aren't as organized nicely because it really stems from that. Can the head go and carry the body to the foot to go over? And this is rolling down, this is rolling down. I mean, even when I do that now, I can feel a difference coming here because that turn doesn't complete the same way it does here just from doing just this for a couple of seconds. So, and again, I'm very sensitive, but it could be for a lot more than just that, but just this little bit, I'm sure you can see, I don't know, but I can feel a complete difference, especially through the shoulder girdle. So, again, people think that I am specifically touching this area on purpose. Yes, I'm touching that area on purpose, but not because it is a purposeful structural area. What I'm doing, and I'll move my fingers around the whole body depending on where I'm working on, is again, when I touch, I can touch and just very lightly know where there's efficiencies or inefficiencies in the system. And because I'm so sensitive, I can literally go here. Now here I can feel where I don't turn as efficiently. Here it's a little bit better. But still right now, just from feeling this, I would want to work on this area of my skull in relationship to the head and the turn, because here, beyond here, it's a Fore's. And so that's where I just go, that's interesting. Now, I can spend an hour doing just this, especially if the person comes to me a lot, and I can do that detailed. Like right now, I'm working with a munchkin who's 11. Nonverbal, autistic, fine, you know, if you need the labels. But he's having about 20 lessons with me. So I know, and I, you know, telling the mom, I can just do this for an hour. And how he ends up integrating it, that's great. And I can do detailed work. The thing that you really have to realize when someone comes to you or you're working with them, there's obvious, I had trauma, therefore that's why they, you know, people seem to need an explanation why they're coming to me, instead of just coming to me because I hear you have really great hands, I want to be felt up. Nope. They come to me because of case specific. But like, I'm lucky because I've had a lot of strange and unusual events of people that have come into my life, and I've learned from them. One guy's been struck by lightning and he was thrown out of 2 vehicles. Can't say that many people have happened to that. But the same thing with my son. He had a Haemophilus influenza infection for over 3 years. I have not found anybody else in this world that had that kind of infection for that length of time. So I have no one to compare notes to. Also, a lot of things, like I just worked on my cousin. So I know this is getting off the skull, but I'm talking about how I just go, So I'm working on my cousin on Sunday, and it's nice to work on family, and she just had her hip done. And the surgery's about 3 weeks old, so, you know, I was cautious as how we're lifting, but she's now she just started driving that day or something, long distances. And we just happened to talk about, we both had bars on our feet. And I totally caught that on her right hip. Well, by golly, that's how she's lifting the leg, like she's throwing this big heavy bar up. She wasn't bending the knee, she wasn't using the back, and all of that, which could be, or probably why she ended up blowing the hip, or that hip failed first, because she was still doing something like that. So once it was found out, recorrected. Now how I found out she had a bar on her feet, I don't know. Maybe I was talking about me, and she's like, I had one too. So to touch someone thinking it's case specific, it's like reading the ending of a book and forgetting the rest of it. You might enjoy the ending of the book, you might say, but you don't get character development, you don't get plot development, you don't learn more about what the author was trying to tell you or to convey through the stories. You're not getting that in-depth relationship. You might have enjoyed the ending and thought, oh, that's great, but it's different than reading the whole book and wanting to know what's on the next page, or where you can't go to sleep because you gotta read one more chapter. And that's how I touch a body. Even though I said I'm working with 11-year-old nonverbal autism, again, that's for your visualization. I'm working on a young man, you know what I mean? And so when people call me up and say, I need your advice, I've got this person coming in and has XYZ, what should I do? Give him a lesson. Give him a lesson. Because what someone's trying to tell you or thinking you should know is completely different than what their body is telling you. Like my son's had 24 surgeries. Well, when I touch him, his body's not saying, I had 24 surgeries. But he might be sensitive in some areas. I had a 68-year-old man, and he's like, I'm fat, I'm old, you can't help me. And I'm like, oh, sit down. He was with his buddies, and I work on the one buddies, but he was visiting. And I do quickies on people just to show him what I do. And I went to lift up his knee, and he went and kicked his knee out. I was like, oh, when did you break your leg? When I was 14. So good, you're still wearing a cast. Because he presented as if he was in a 90-degree angle and boot, and it came out at an angle. And and that's when people think I'm psychic. I'm not psychic, I'm just listening to your system. So, and how also the movement that you're doing applies, because like how I did the lesson originally on you, this particular lesson that I'm going to teach, one of your complaints is when I sew and I'm bringing my fabric this way, how your table's set up, that's where it gets you. Well, again, that's where that whole relationship that we're working on, and you'll see it it's nice that I'm doing it on somebody else, so you'll see the relationship and how working with the nose to come to the floor and the chin to come to the floor. Another weird situation, or I shouldn't say weird, unusual that I just had. I was working on, she's a nurse about to retire, she's 67. Okay. And she's like, I'm just stiff. Well, when I touched her hips, I was like, honestly, I'm thinking, how the heck are you walking, lady, much less being a nurse? Well, so when I'm trying to, and I don't want to tell people, like, what'd you do? But it was lifetime in her. I mean, there was no roll, there was nothing. Oh, I was a preemie, I'm lucky to be alive. All I remember, they said I was very listless, and I'm like, So what it was, and one of the simple things that she's remarked on, and which I thought was like cool, was she actually she didn't know how to roll over. So to roll in her bed, she would have to sit up, move her body. Like, she'd have to wake up in the middle of the night, move her body, and lie back down again. And she's like, I can roll over in my sleep now, and I don't wake up. That's amazing. I mean, it's 67 years old, So, and then two, that's another thing that I find unusual. How do you go 67 years and not look to change that? But again, it's like me saying I see blue or this, it's I see like a rust or a copper tone or whatever, whereas someone else with a different eye, and a different eye when you're in the Caribbean, colors are much brighter, or so this might look very dull to someone that's used to that pop. Someone that's more up north, this might be too bright and funky. It all depends on where they are. They might not enjoy this color, where some people it's like, oh, it's my favorite. So there's an attachment to a color, because every person sees it a different way. And if you don't believe me, look at someone who's colorblind. This sweater might look like, throw up, or might look like it anyway, because they are not colorblind. I don't know. But and it's the same thing to consider when touching a system, and that's what you're touching as a system. I might look like I'm working with the temporal bone today, or the nasal cavity, or the jaw, but I'm still, like I said, when I'm doing that, you'll start to see that relationship that I'm working on the entire body. Your pinky is just as important as your nose. Just is. We're all different, but we're all made pretty darn similar. So, and I still say, if you look at the anatomy book, for all I know, that was a serial killer, John Doe, that they took, and they're all trying to make that to be, what the world should look like. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what that person's personality was that we all use for, like, Grey's Anatomy. But if it was a cadaver that was donated, I mean, you really don't know that person's history that we're studying. So, and it shows up in the bones. We are our life. We are our life experiences. We are our movements, good or bad, from the car accidents down to, or like I had another guy, I went to roll him over. Just this, I'm exaggerating, but it was like a quiver, a shake. Did you fall a lot? Oh yeah, I was a klutz as a kid. I always had something, broken, scratched. My mom was always on me, and, it was like the beginning of helicopter moms. Okay. Still wasn't making sense. Here he was a near drowning when he was 4.5. His dad was a doctor, got the water out of his lungs, but it was almost like he still had that panic hit in the pool or whatever in his system at 40. Now again, full functioning and all of that, family, kids, but those conversations are still in people's systems. And to sit there and just to touch them, to feel them, just to go, Even if you're the parent, there's stuff that goes on with your kids, which you learn as you get older, that you had no knowledge of. and where they didn't want to tell you, and, like my brother-in-law went a whole day with a broken ankle because he was too afraid of letting his parents know that he was on a motorcycle, and he was trying to hide it until it swelled up like a watermelon. But again, allowing that to happen. And so we all do stuff, and stuff too maybe didn't seem like a big deal, or because we were with someone, like I was electrocuted or whatever when I was probably like 13, 14. Nobody ever took me to the doctor. I don't know if it did anything to me, but it was pretty funky. But I think my mom wrapped the arm with an ace bandage. And again, it's not a fault or a complaint, but I mean, there's stuff that happens that you just don't even consider because you were like, and just go on. But again, what stores, and it's not a cellular memory, it's just a lesson in movement. And if your brain learned, like choking on something, if your brain learned, I just can't eat that again, you'll see it much more with morning sickness. I loved juiced carrots up to when I was pregnant. And I don't know what it was about either the smell or the taste, and it's really hard for me to say, you're eating that because it's good for you versus because my brain's going, I remember those days and I'm not going back there. So again, if you choked on somebody, you might think, I passed, but what your body stores as information and or like, don't eat that again because I'm going to choke on shrimp, or that made me sick that day, therefore I'm allergic to, maybe you are, maybe it was just a fluke. So you just have to be open for those kind of touches. And again, when I work on someone for 20 lessons straight, what's going to happen? I don't know. Where I don't go too is like the first day when they're like, well, what should I be doing at home? Let's see what we got when we're done. And then start having that conversation. Because I'll tell you now, that child's just, a person, you're going to change. So where you're going to go with it and to your ideas with, because once you start seeing the possibilities and all of that, then your mind gets excited to go with it. So, any questions?